Hey, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with. It's the interview series presented by WFPK at WFPK.org, Consequence, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thanks as always for making your way here, for checking out the series. Of course, you know what to do if you like what you see, what you hear. Hit that subscribe button. I put out 3 new interviews every single week, so it's a great way to keep up with all of your favorite artists. And I'm so excited. John Bradley is here today. We're going to be talking about the new Netflix series called Three Body Problem. Hello.
Hey Kyle, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. It's such a pleasure to talk to you. Of course, we've enjoyed you over the years, most famously with Game of Thrones and everything else. And here you are back, basically with some of that team again. And this series, this show, it's incredible. It's mind-bending. There's so much to dig into. Um, I think this was a big gamble. It sounds like for everybody, and from my point of view, at least. What a payoff. Congratulations to you all on this.
Oh, thank you so much. It's very nice to hear that you liked it. And yeah, it was a big gamble for everybody, especially, David and Dan, who I worked with for nearly a decade on Game of Thrones. This is the first thing that they've created since Game of Thrones ended, and that ended 5 years ago, I think, as far as being on TV is concerned. So they took a long break, and when it comes to their first thing after that, anybody who's seen it will tell you that they've not taken the easy way out. They've not been kind to themselves. They've embarked upon an adaptation that is in many ways even more complex and even more knotty and even more has even more scope to it than Game of Thrones did. So hats off to them for taking on this challenge. And it's nice to know that you think that they and we as a cast and everybody involved has pulled it off. We're very proud of it.
Yeah, that's the thing. So, so we get into this. This is still sci-fi fantasy, and but it's a very different world than what we're talking about with Game of Thrones. It's present day, a little bit of futuristic and everything, and it's very scientific. I mean, very expansive in that scope. What was that like coming from your all? Because you like to try to explain this to somebody, like there are the easy ways, and there are the ways that we're not going to, with spoilers, we're not going to get into or anything like that.
Yeah.
But like, let's do the easy stuff. What was it about this that drew you to it? And how was it kind of performing in this sort of way when it's not just, I mean, this isn't cotton candy.
No, I think there are very few shows, very few movies that have gone before that you can even compare it to in terms of the size of it and the scope of it and just the depth and complexity of the ideas. It's really kind of out on its own. And there was we released our first kind of teaser trailer for it in June of last year, and my friends watched it and they said they've never known it before when they know less about a show having watched the trailer than they did before they watched the trailer. It's a bit like how from the outside you look at it and you think how can one show partly take place in the Cultural Revolution in China in the 1960s, part of it take place in the present day, and then seemingly part of it take place in Tudor England and Kubla Khan's pleasure dome in Mongolia. And I think it was just the sheer ambition of it that drew me to it. And from a slightly more personal point of view, David and Dan, my old bosses, they wrote this part especially for me. They told me about this show way back in, I think, early 2020, and they said, we've written this part for you. We're adapting a very popular series of Chinese sci-fi novels, and we've kind of written a part that's as close to you as any part you'll ever play. And first of all, I was thinking, well, how's that going to fit into very, very dense and very scientific science fiction? And on the other hand, you do think, well, I'm kind of going to get to find out what you really think about me now. Because if somebody says to you, we're going to write a part and we think it's exactly like you, it's a bit like seeing yourself drawn by one of those caricature artists. I'm just thinking, oh, please don't let him be a sort of piece of garbage loser. But no, I was very happy with it. And yeah, I mean, I've not done a big TV thing since Game of Thrones, and they were the guys who were going to tempt me back. And yeah, it was just reading the scripts, reading how they've taken these novels and really humanized them and found the human stories in them, and taken the scientific principles at play, but made it about romance and made it about human struggle and all of that stuff. That's what they did on Thrones as well. They take these huge expansive things and find ways of making them intimate and human. And yeah, they've done it again, and it was a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing that they wrote it for you. Like, so I haven't read the novels myself, but in researching the novels, I went back and I was looking for your character, and I was like, I don't think that he's necessarily in here, or
Yeah.
maybe it was taken from parts of that and everything. But it's funny to hear that because, you know, even the way this character though is described, bit of a big mouth, Oxford dropouts. There's a hilariously, I love the cigar aficionado poster
Oh
that's
yeah,
behind you
yeah,
the entire time.
yeah. But
So how close did it come then? Once you dug into the character?
I think there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot about my character Jack Rooney that is like me, and that I'm not particularly flattered about. I mean, he is super opinionated. He's super kind of vociferous in his opinions, and he's quite bullish, and I am a bit like that sometimes. But in a way, that's the part of me that I'd like to be all the time. Everybody would like to have that confidence and that conviction in their opinions, and I am like that sometimes, and that's the side of me that they've taken and they've adapted into this story. But yeah, I think that another element of Jack Rooney that's very similar to me, now I think about it, is he's from a working class background in the north, in Manchester, north of England, where I'm from. And we both find ourselves mixing in circles and mixing with people that we have no real right to be mixing with sometimes. Like from our background, people from our background don't tend to be physics, going for doctorates in physics in Oxford. Some people do, I know. And it's very unlikely that somebody like me would become a television actor and do these kind of big American shows and stuff like that. So I think that taking from our background, going into the worlds that we've gone into, and refusing to be cowed and refusing to feel inferior and all of that, maybe it's a kind of chip on your shoulder masquerading as a kind of superiority complex. Who knows? But yeah, there's a lot about us and that's similar. And I don't think that and nobody who didn't know me properly, I don't think they'd ever offer me this part, to be honest. I think from Game of Thrones and from the other things that I've done, I'm kind of in people's minds as a certain type of character. And I hope that David and Dan have given me this part, and it's going to make people see me in a slightly different light. I think that was their thinking behind it. And they kind of started my first act of my career with Game of Thrones, and they started the second act with this character, and I couldn't be more grateful.
That's really interesting. I know that's always a thing. It's as you're trying to build your career because what there's the safe way of doing it of taking the money jobs and going where that road takes you, and then there's this obvious thing where the artist side of everyone, of us all, where it's not the easiest thing and you're trying to break that mold and that character. But I also feel like, and again, I know this is part of the compliments of the show, but I mean, this has got to be the type of thing that you'd be looking for. I think that anybody would be excited to get, with something like this.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of it's happening more and more now, but there was a time where something that was so intellectually demanding of an audience, you either had to be sort of intellectually demanding or go for the popular or go for the numbers. And now that seems to be, it feels like people who make TV and make movies, they're treating their audience with a bit more respect now. And maybe Game of Thrones was a part of that transition in terms of people. It wasn't just people who liked heavy fantasy who liked that show. It was everybody seemed to like it, and it broadened its audience out. And I think that Three Body Problem is sort of shamelessly aiming to be the biggest show in the world without compromising on any of the artistry or the intellect behind the premise of the show and the premise of the book. So it's kind of straddling both. In an ideal world, you want to do stuff that you have a lot of faith in and you've put your heart and soul into, and for it to be popular as well. That's what everybody's going for, I think.
Yeah, in the trailer, there's this great version of Radiohead's. I think it's Everything in Its Right Place, if I remember, is used.
Yeah.
And after I saw it, to what you're saying right now, that's what I thought is like this series is like Radiohead. It is
Yeah.
complex, and there are these moments that could be challenging, but at the same time, I think my mom, who's not a Radiohead, probably knows the melody of Karma Police. Like it still works just for anybody.
Yeah,
Like that's the great thing about. By the way, the use of Radiohead, and it's even used more. I wrote some of that down. Was it Karma Police? Actually, yeah, that's used in the show as well. Like, oh yeah,
yeah.
that hit me perfect.
Oh, good. Well, I'm very pleased to hear it. That's. I'm a avowed Beatles obsessive, and I think that in the last few years with Get Back and the way the Beatles' work has been re-evaluated and rediscovered by people, it's when you think that how challenging they were and how experimental they were, and they were the biggest band in the world, you could kind of do that. Then you could kind of be the equivalent of whoever the biggest band now is, or the biggest act now, Taylor Swift or somebody, and you could be absolutely off the wall in terms of the things that the new ground you were breaking, and encouraging your audience to to think a different way about things. All of that, and that tends to be the work that sort of stands the test of time, and that's why they're being rediscovered now, because all the work went in 50 years ago, and people are still getting a lot, or 60 years ago, and people are still getting a lot from it. And it's when you've got an artistic vision like that, that's when people are going to invest in it till the end of time.
Yeah, well, you can have an album that's got Blackbird and Revolution Number 9 on the same thing, and two
Yeah,
versions as an offshoot. It's I see them over. Who I'm trying to make out who's over your shoulder. Is that John and Paul?
those are there.
Yeah,
Those guys.
yeah,
Yeah, that's Jon and Paul.
yeah.
I'm determined to get the full set of those. They're like all they're very. My friend got me them for my birthday. They're like they were a very rare limited edition, like 30 years ago, of these special porcelain kind of mugs. I'm a sucker for it. If the Beatles bring anything out, they're taking my money off me.
What was your
Sadly,
what was your first impressions of Now and Then?
I I loved it, but it kind of it was always going to be like that. As soon as you find out it's a John song, and as soon as you find out it's it's the Beatles' final song, and there's a poignancy kind of embedded into that. It was always going to be slow, and it was always going to be reflective, and it was always going to be on the piano, and it's similar to what the vast majority of John's more famous solo work kind of consists of. But part of me was thinking, wouldn't it be amazing if the Beatles' last song ever turned out to be a rock and roller,
It's
like
the
a
big
proper kind
Chippewa
of
thing, right?
yeah, kind of big kind of foot stomping rock and roller, the kind of music that they loved. If you hear some of their early recordings, they were just they come across like a punk band in terms of the volume of it, in terms of the energy of it, the spirit of it, and they kind of they had such an evolution as a band. But I was happy with Now and Then, but I just thought, wouldn't it be great to have a final Beatles song that was a bit more uplifting than this? But in the end, the poignancy was always baked in. It was always going to be poignant no matter what. But just to be alive at the same time as a Beatles single comes out, that's like seeing Hamlet when it first came out.
Right.
That's what it's going to feel like in 100 years' time, probably.
I will say when Free as a Bird and Real Love came out, and I was a teenager, and that was they became, I mean, they're still two of my all-time favorite songs. And I got swept up, and that's really when I had my first big Beatles moment. So that's I was hoping for that. And when I first heard it, I went, "Oh, yeah, okay. It's nice, it's pretty, it's long and winding road style, of course Paul
Yeah,
on that one, but which is not always my favorite, but and it is one. The more and more I heard it, the more and more I was like, this is absolutely just a beautiful song, and
yeah.
I only do wish that
And
we would have had the earlier Paul on there, but that's what can you do?
in AR, with AR, you can do whatever you want. You could have that. You can have anything you want now. And yeah, I saw an AI and a thing on YouTube of Paul from the 70s, I think, singing recent Paul kind of solo work. And it's amazing how he's changed his songwriting to suit his voice over the years. Because I've often said about Paul, especially when he was a younger guy, Paul McCartney doesn't have a great voice. Paul McCartney has loads of great voices.
That's a fun way of saying it. You're right.
He can kind of sing anything, and you know he's still a very sort of important artist in a way who stretches himself. But I wish I could have seen him, especially in concert,
Mhm.
back when he could sing anything that you put in front of him. That would have been very special.
Yeah, I still think the album "New," which is probably a decade ago at this point, it's definitely not new
Yeah,
anymore. Like that's one of his greatest like late career moments. That whole album, I still all the time.
yeah.
Yeah,
And that was interestingly, that was working. I think that was the album that he worked with lots of different producers on it, like 4 or 5 different producers, and it's just a very varied album. On My Way to Work is one of my favorite kind of Paul solo career highlights, and yeah, he's still, you know, he's not going away quietly. He's never gone away. That's the thing about him. He's such a creative force. He's not just gonna retire. He's always got creativity inside him, and those kinds of people are really inspirational, I think.
yeah. And I will get back to the movie, but I'll also mentioning like I saw you saw AC/DC last year, which I'm very envious of, and Elton on the farewell tour. Like
Yeah.
that's not too bad shows to take in a year.
No, I mean, one of the kind of bonuses of, you know, doing well and sort of having a few bucks in your pocket is that I can take my parents to see the artists and bands that they've always wanted to see, and go to see them in concert, even especially if they haven't seen them before. Because my parents are kind of advancing a bit now. They're both in their 70s and they still love their music. So to take my mum to see Elton John and my dad to see AC/DC and the Rolling Stones, it's kind of comes full circle, and it just feels like a really nice thing to do for them. And I should say that I know that Elton's finished his tour now for good, but in terms of being a showman and in terms of never, you can just tell he never does a bad show. He knows exactly what he's doing. His command of a crowd, even at his age, is just second to none. It was a really powerful experience to be in the same room as him, and I'm glad I could take my mum, but I'm so glad that I could see that as well.
Sure. No, it is. I've seen him once, not this tour, but it was incredible. And I'm looking at some of the other. I mean, you got the Stones on this soundtrack as well on Three Bought a Problem with Moonlight Mile, Mazzy Star, Lana Del
Yeah,
Rey, Can't Find My Way Home. It's all great. But I also wanted to touch on because we didn't get to talk yet about some of these themes, only a little bit too, because what an opening scene! It's so powerful from the beginning.
yeah,
I mean, the down with academic authorities, and I was thinking about just how this lines up, especially over the past couple of years in as conspiracy theories run amok in this digital age that we now find ourselves in, but the scientist plight in today's environment. Do you all talk about any of that when you're in the moment, like how this is actually speaking for some of the stuff, not just in AI, but the deep fake stuff and all that, and what's going on with like, does that ever come up as you all are fleshing the script of the characters out?
I think I think it probably comes up in sort of earlier discussions and things like that. But as far as being an actor is concerned, I think that although it feels like a collaboration, we all do just feel like we're mouthpieces for whatever ideas are in the script, and I've never been the type of actor to kind of pull bigger themes apart. I'm just kind of I'll do my own little patch of this duvet, and everybody else can do theirs. But in terms of in terms of what's happened to science in the past few years, and you know there was a government minister in this country a few years ago who said that the public are sick to death of experts. That was the actual phrase he uses, and you do start to think, well, if you're not letting experts make the decisions, who are you allowing to make the decisions really?
Right.
In terms of qualifications and a sort of deeper understanding of things. There's no way that your agenda and your kind of take on it as a lay person, there's no way that that stands up and can look eye to eye with an expert's opinion on it. But it's a strange time for science now. But ultimately, if you injure yourself, chances are you're going to ring a doctor.
Right.
Chances are you're going to ring an expert one of these days. If you want to sort of shun expertise and shun scientific discovery and thousands of years of development and all that stuff, fine. you can do, but don't come calling for it when you really need it.
That's the part that gives me hope, is like, I mean, lots of stuff is all it's there's always noise out there. There's always noise out there. But every now and then some of that noise gets a little loud where you go, what is going on here? And again, I'm just kind of pulling that back into to this show, where I think that's what I appreciated about this, because it wipes a lot of that away, even when it's not
Yeah,
meaning to, you know, it's just puts the
yeah,
focus back on, it was Laurie Anderson, you know, Lou Reed, Laurie Anderson. She had a song called
yeah,
Only an Expert. That's, I mean, when it comes down to it, though, you have talking
yeah,
heads and you have people making noise, and then you have the people that you actually trust. And thank goodness for
yeah. Exactly, and it does make a lot of, and the book makes this point as well. It kind of encourages people to recalibrate the way we see otherness
Mhm.
and the way we see other people from other, it could be other countries, or in terms of other planets. And when it comes to three body problem, that we'd always consider whoever is foreign to be the enemy, and we don't really think of them as human beings. We don't really think of them as people. We just see we're encouraged by a lot of politicians in this country and globally to see otherness as a threat. And in Three Body Problem, the threat is a very big existential one for mankind, as far as we can see it. But you know what I mean? We don't know what their story is. In sort of alien invasion movies in the past, we think, oh, we're the good guys and the people who are trying to invade are the bad guys. But what if they've got justified reasons to do it? And what if it's more nuanced and more complicated than that? And the show and the book doesn't batter you over the head with those kind of ideas, but they're just there for you if you want to,
Mhm.
take notice of them. And I think that all of that leads to a very rich and very layered piece that it's got a lot. There's an awful lot to it, and like, to bring it back around to the Beatles again, there's so much in it, and there'll be something in it that you like, even if you don't accept all of it, even if some of it goes slightly over your head. There'll be enough in that show to draw you in, we think, and we're just very excited for people to see it.
It really is. And it's visually stunning. I mean, and it's just incredible to watch, and it is so gripping. And I do love seeing it. I know you've got other things going on too. I mean, North Shore, what you've been doing down in Australia, is that still?
Yeah, well, North Shore, that was on in that's on streaming on Paramount Plus in Australia. We're still hoping to get it seen in the UK and the US. It's under the Paramount umbrella, so hopefully it'll be out one day. And I really hope people do see it, because before that, before we did that, my agent said, "What do you want to do next?" And I said, "Well, think about all the things I've never done before, in terms of I've never done a sort of romance before. I've never done a cop thing before. Everything that I've done seems to take place in some kind of heightened reality, whether it be in Game of Thrones, or whether it be in space, or whether it be as part of a sort of international pop stars tour in Entourage, the Marry Me, a movie that I did with Jennifer Lopez a couple of years ago. None of that's really the world that you see out of your window. And the thing about North Shore was it's a very real world, very grounded, quite gritty crime drama in which I play a cop who's struggling with his marriage, and all of that. It's everything that I wanted to do for so long. So I hope that it reaches a wider audience, because it's a show that I'm very proud of. So fingers crossed people can see that one day.
Yeah. So I will then half apologetically ask that question that probably comes up on this part of the conversation, but with a monster like Game of Thrones, and how many of the people are like Jon Snow prequel, sequel, whatever, like, would you
Yeah.
go back? Do you go back that direction if that comes up?
It's a weird one, that, because I think that when I played that character for a decade, I think I was able to access that because that character was much closer to the person that I was then.
Mhm.
And that was a skin that I slipped into very easily. Now, having been away from it for 5 years, when I think about it, that character of Sam seems like he's behind glass now, and like I can't access him anymore.
Mhm.
So it'd be interesting to see how there's been no kind of kind of offer or any kind of approach about that. But I just think now I think that we all progress as people, and sort of about looking forward. And I'd like to think that Three Body Problem will do something for my career in terms of people seeing me in a slightly different way. And I just think to just go back and even try to put that skin on again, I think it'd be a lot more difficult than people think it would, I think.
Right, right. I can understand that. Thank goodness for Three Body Problem, because it's exactly what I wanted to see right now, and it's an incredible series. And again, I know I've said it, but congratulations, John, to you
Thank
and the
you.
whole cast and the crew, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk about it.
Oh, my pleasure, Carl. Thank you for having me on, man. And thank you for, hitting on music and stuff, that I could bore the world to death about that. This has been a really lovely chat. Thank you so much.
And thanks to my guest. Also, thanks to you for checking out the episode in the series. Before you get out of here, hit that subscribe button. Again, you get 3 brand new interviews every single week. New one every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at right here on YouTube, or of course anywhere in podcast land, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, NPR, or WFPK.org as well. A great way to keep up with your favorite artists and discover new ones as well. Then after that, actually head over to WFPK.org. That's where I do a show Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. It's an hour full of song premieres, music news, anniversary spins, bonus interviews, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern at WFPK.org. Consequence has your music and film news. You can also find me on the social media spots, Facebook, Instagram, mostly on Twitter. All 3 of them, the address is at Kyle Meredith. Do hope you like and follow along. That does it for another edition. I'm Kyle Meredith. I'll see you next time.